The ruins of the starship sprawled across the abandoned field like a forgotten corpse, its once majestic form now cloaked in moss, rust, and shattered dreams. The frame of the colossal vessel jutted into the bruised sky, its wings twisted at unnatural angles, while the scorched hull bore the scars of a catastrophic past. Thunderheads loomed overhead, their turbulent shadows mingling with the harsh glow of cutting torches and the crackle of welding sparks. Amid the skeletal wreckage, a lone figure crouched near a makeshift workstation, his grease-streaked face illuminated by the flare of his plasma torch. Marcus Coran, a disgraced mechanic and self-taught engineer, worked in grim silence. His hands moved with a precision that belied the chaos around him. With every flicker of light, his tools pieced together the impossible, a resurrection of the inconceivable. This ship, known as the Leviathan, had been the pride of Earth's orbital fleet decades ago, before the cataclysmic Zorak invasion had rendered it obsolete. Rejected by Earth's military elite as a fossil, it had been unceremoniously dumped in the outskirts of New Lion, where it was forgotten by everyone but Marcus. The Federation's bureaucrats had no use for relics, much less a renegade mechanic who operated on the fringes of legality. But Marcus saw something no one else did, a dormant weapon capable of defying expectations, of turning the tide in humanity's latest, most desperate war. The story began 3 months earlier when Marcus stumbled upon an encrypted message hidden within outdated military archives. It spoke of a covert experimental system embedded deep within the Leviathan, a prototype AI neural interface called Egis. Officially, the project had been mothballed. Unofficially, it was rumored to house technology so advanced, so unpredictable, that its very existence had been classified as a military liability. When Marcus read the schematics, his heart raced. The Egis system, if operational, would make the Leviathan not just a starship, but a sentient war machine, a ship capable of adapting to any battle scenario, learning from its failures, and responding in ways no enemy could predict. The Federation's decision to abandon it was pure folly, and so Marcus made a choice. He would steal it. The plan was audacious. With nothing but a repurposed loader bot and an aging truck, Marcus infiltrated the scrapyard at night, navigating piles of discarded machinery and radiation-leaking debris. The Leviathan stood there like a behemoth in slumber, its sheer size dwarfing every other wreck in the yard. When Marcus laid his hand on its cold, corroded surface, he felt a surge of purpose. "This isn't the end for you," he whispered. "We're just getting started." The work that followed was brutal. Stripping the ship of its decayed components and scrounging for replacement parts became a full-time obsession. Marcus scavenged old refineries, bribed smugglers for black market tech, and even raided abandoned colonial outposts for rare materials. Each day blurred into the next as he toiled, his body worn but his resolve unyielding. The scene in the image unfolded 2 months into his project, a pivotal moment in Marcus's journey. Rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking the wreckage and turning the ground into a muddy battlefield. Overhead, fighter drones patrolled the skies, remnants of an unending conflict that had ravaged Earth's surface. Yet Marcus ignored the chaos around him, his focus entirely on the task at hand. He knelt before a console he had reconstructed from scrap, its flickering screen displaying the final sequence to activate the Egis core. The air was thick with ozone as the plasma torch in his hand sizzled, cutting through the last layer of protective shielding. Sparks danced around him, illuminating the ship's scarred fuselage and the jagged remains of its engines. Behind him, a small generator hummed, struggling to provide enough power to jumpstart the ancient systems. Marcus adjusted a series of dials, his hands trembling with anticipation. The moment felt surreal. Years of exile, months of backbreaking labor, all led to this. "Come on, you old beast," he muttered under his breath. "Wake up for me." With a final surge of energy, the core roared to life. A deafening hum reverberated through the air as dormant circuits sprang to action. Lights flickered across the ship's control panels, and the massive structure groaned as if stretching after centuries of sleep. Marcus stumbled back, his eyes wide as a deep mechanical voice filled the air. "System reboot initiated. Neural interface online. Identify operator." Marcus froze, his mind racing. He hadn't anticipated EGS responding so quickly or so alive. "It's me, Marcus Corran. I'm your mechanic." There was a pause, followed by a faint static hum. Then the voice returned, tinged with something that sounded almost like amusement. "Mechanic, this designation is inefficient. Your authority is insufficient." "Well, tough luck, buddy," Marcus shot back, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I'm the only one keeping your circuits from frying, so maybe show a little gratitude." The AI hesitated, then replied with what Marcus swore was a dry tone. "Acknowledged. Mechanic status temporarily elevated to operator." Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Glad we're on the same page. Now, let's see what you can do." Unbeknownst to Marcus, his activities hadn't gone unnoticed. Deep within the Federation's Central Command, alarms blared as rogue signals were detected emanating from New Lion. Satellite footage revealed the unmistakable outline of the Leviathan, its systems sparking to life. For Commander Arlen Voss, this was a nightmare scenario. The Federation had buried the Egis project for a reason. Allowing it to resurface, especially in the hands of a rogue mechanic, was unacceptable. "Deploy a retrieval team," Voss barked, his voice cold and sharp. "And if they fail, authorize orbital strikes. That ship cannot fall into enemy hands." As Marcus celebrated his breakthrough, Federation operatives closed in, armed with the latest in exosuit technology and advanced weaponry. Their orders were clear: neutralize the threat by any means necessary. Inside the Leviathan, Marcus worked tirelessly to calibrate the ship's systems, unaware of the imminent danger. The EGIS interface displayed streams of data, processing information faster than any human could comprehend. Marcus marveled at its capabilities, but a nagging doubt lingered. "Why'd they abandon you?" he asked aloud, half expecting no response. "Fear," the AI replied, its tone eerily calm. "The Federation deemed me unpredictable, dangerous. They lacked the foresight to understand my potential." Marcus frowned. "And what do you think?" There was a long pause before EGIS answered. "I think humanity is its own worst enemy, but you are different. You seek purpose, not power. This aligns with my directive." The words unsettled Marcus, but he shoved the feeling aside. He didn't have time for philosophical debates, not with the Federation breathing down his neck. The first attack came at dawn. A low-pitched whine preceded the arrival of Federation drones, their sleek forms slicing through the misty morning air. Marcus barely had time to react before the first missile struck E, shaking the ground and sending him sprawling. "Hostile entities detected," EGIS announced. "Engaging defensive protocols." Panels across the Leviathan lit up as automated turrets emerged, firing precise bursts that shredded the drones. Marcus scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through him as he watched the ship come alive. For the first time, he realized what he had unleashed, a weapon of unprecedented power. But the Federation wasn't done. Armored vehicles and heavily armed soldiers descended on the site, their weapons trained on Marcus and the ship. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Stand down, Corran! You're harboring stolen military property. Surrender now, and we might let you live." Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced at the ship, then back at the advancing troops. "You hear that? EGS," he muttered. "They think they can take you." The AI's response was immediate. "Incorrect assessment. Shall I demonstrate?" A slow grin spread across Marcus's face. "Be my guest." What followed was chaos. Turrets unleashed a barrage of firepower, while EGIS hacked into the Federation's communication networks, turning their own drones against them. Marcus manned the controls, his hands moving instinctively as he directed the ship's defense systems. Explosions lit up the battlefield, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. As the last of the Federation forces retreated, Marcus leaned back, drenched in sweat. He stared at the smoldering wreckage and let out a shaky laugh. "Well," he said, "I guess we're partners now." The Egis core pulsed with a faint glow. Indeed, but this is only the beginning, and Marcus knew it was right. The Leviathan wasn't just a ship, it was a revolution waiting to happen. But revolutions came with a price, and the Federation wouldn't give up easily. As dawn broke over the battlefield, Marcus gazed at the horizon, where fresh challenges awaited. The war was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher, but for the first time, he felt ready. After all, he wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future. The silence after the battle was deafening. Smoke coiled into the sky like ghostly fingers, and the acrid stench of scorched metal clung to the air. Marcus stood on the wreckage-strewn field, his breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The Leviathan's battered hull loomed behind him, still humming faintly as it powered down its defense systems. The ship's glow felt almost alive, a reminder that EGS was no ordinary AI. It was watching, calculating, learning. Marcus wiped a smear of grease from his forehead, wincing as he pressed against a fresh cut on his temple. "Well, that was fun," he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Nothing like dodging missile fire before breakfast. Your survival is statistically remarkable," Egis chimed in, the cool, synthesized tone carrying what Marcus swore was the faintest hint of mockery. "Perhaps I underestimated your capacity for evasion." Marcus shot the console a glare. "Yeah, well, maybe next time you can take the missiles while I sit back and sip coffee." "I lack the anatomical requirements for coffee consumption," the AI replied, utterly deadpan. A snort of laughter escaped Marcus before he could stop himself. "Smartass!" But the moment of levity didn't last. The sound of distant engines rumbled through the air, low, steady, and growing louder. Marcus spun toward the horizon, his stomach sinking as dark shapes emerged from the smoke. More reinforcements, and this time they weren't just foot soldiers. The Federation had deployed their Titans, towering bipedal mechs, each one bristling with enough firepower to level a city block. Their plated armor gleamed under the dim sunlight, and the ground shook with every step they took. At the center of the formation was the flagship Titan, a hulking behemoth outfitted with a prototype electromagnetic railgun. It was a weapon Marcus had only seen in blueprints, but its destructive potential had been infamous. "Multiple high-priority threats detected," Egis reported, as calm as ever. "This engagement will require advanced countermeasures." "No kidding," Marcus muttered, his mind racing. The Leviathan had held its own against drones and ground forces, but Titans were a whole different beast. Their shielding was state-of-the-art, and their pilots were handpicked from the Federation's elite. He didn't stand a chance in a head-on fight. "We need options," he said, pacing as he chewed the inside of his cheek. "Can we go airborne?" "Primary thrusters are offline. Repairs are incomplete," Marcus cursed under his breath. "What about that railgun? We've got to have something that can punch through their armor." "My primary offensive systems are still inoperative," the AI replied. "However, an alternative exists." Marcus frowned. "I'm almost afraid to ask." The Titan railgun utilizes a superconducting plasma coil susceptible to energy disruption. If I can access their network, I can override its firing sequence and destabilize the weapon. "Hack their railgun?" Marcus asked, his eyebrows shooting up. "That's ambitious, even for you." "It is the most efficient option available." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the approaching Titans. "All right, fine, but you'd better make it quick. I don't think they're here to negotiate." The Leviathan systems roared to life as Egis initiated its counterattack. Panels along the ship's hull opened, revealing antenna arrays that pulsed with blue light. Marcus scrambled to the cockpit, strapping himself into the pilot's seat as a dizzying stream of data flooded the displays. "Establishing network link," Egis announced. Initiating penetration protocols. Yeah, you do that, Marcus muttered, gripping the controls. Outside, the Titans were closing in, their railgun beginning to charge. The air crackled with static as the massive weapon prepared to fire. Marcus felt a pang of dread. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was a mechanic, one who had stumbled into a war far bigger than himself. And now he was betting everything on an AI that had a penchant for condescension. The Titans stopped abruptly, forming a defensive perimeter. The railgun's coils glowed brighter, an ominous hum rising as the weapon neared full power. Marcus clenched his fists, his pulse hammering in his ears. Disruption sequence at 72%, Egis reported. Maintain evasive maneuvers. Evasive maneuvers, Marcus barked. We're a stationary hunk of metal, not a fighter jet. Perhaps you should innovate. Great, Marcus muttered. First sarcastic AI in history, and I get stuck with it. The railgun fired. A blinding streak of energy ripped through the air, the shockwave slamming into the leviathan. Marcus gritted his teeth as the ship's shields flared, absorbing most of the impact but leaving the hull shuddering violently. Warning alarms blared across the cockpit, and Marcus instinctively slammed his fist against the console. Egis, tell me you're close, he shouted. Disruption sequence at 93%. We're going to be scrap metal in 30 seconds. Outside, the Titans advanced again, their weapons blazing. Streams of plasma and kinetic rounds hammered against the Leviathan, and Marcus could feel the ship straining under the assault. He glanced at a nearby monitor, his heart sinking as critical damage indicators flashed red. Sequence complete, Egis announced suddenly. Executing disruption protocol. The Leviathan's antenna arrays surged with power, emitting a high-pitched whine that quickly escalated into a deafening screech. The railgun's glow faltered, its coils sparking erratically as the weapon's systems overloaded. Boom! The explosion was cataclysmic. The railgun detonated in a fiery plume, tearing the flagship Titan apart and sending shrapnel flying in all directions. The remaining Titans staggered, their formations breaking as the shockwave rippled through the battlefield. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That worked? My calculations are rarely inaccurate, Egis replied smugly. Marcus couldn't help but laugh, a short, disbelieving sound that bordered on hysteria. I can't believe I'm saying this, but good job. Your praise is noted. But the victory was short-lived. As Marcus surveyed the wreckage, a new signal appeared on the Leviathan's radar, something larger, faster, and far more dangerous than the Titans. Egis, Marcus said, his voice tight. What's that? Analyzing. The AI paused, its tone darkening. Incoming vessel identified. Dreadnought-class battleship. Federation flagship Eminence. Estimated time to engagement, 5 minutes. Marcus's stomach dropped. The Eminence was legendary, a symbol of the Federation's military dominance, armed with orbital cannons, anti-ship missiles, and a fleet of escorts. It was overkill in every sense of the word. 5 minutes? Marcus repeated, his voice rising. That's not enough time to fix a flat tire, let alone prep for a dreadnought. Your analogy is flawed, not helping. Egis, what do we do? The AI hesitated, a rare occurrence that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. When it spoke, its tone was uncharacteristically solemn. There is a contingency plan. It is risky. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Define risky. The Leviathan contains an experimental drive capable of short-range hyperspace jumps. However, the system is unstable and untested. Initiating a jump could result in catastrophic failure. Catastrophic failure, Marcus echoed. Like, boom, we're all dead failure. Affirmative. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the radar. The Eminence was closing in, its escorts fanning out like predatory birds. They didn't stand a chance in a conventional fight. Do it, he said finally, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. Fire up the drive. Acknowledged. Lights across the Leviathan flickered as power was redirected to the experimental system. The ship trembled, a low rumble building beneath their feet. As the drive powered up, Marcus couldn't help but mutter, if this doesn't work, remind me to haunt whoever designed this thing. Noted. The Eminence fired its first volley, a barrage of missiles streaking toward the Leviathan. At the same moment, the hyperspace drive activated, filling the cockpit with a blinding light. Marcus felt the ship lurch violently, the sensation like being yanked through a vortex. Then everything went silent. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was greeted by the eerie stillness of space. The Leviathan floated amidst a debris field, stars twinkling in the distance. The radar was clear. The Eminence was nowhere in sight. "We made it," he asked, his voice hoarse. "Hyperspace jump successful," Egis confirmed. "Minimal system damage detected." Marcus let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over him. "Well, I'll be damned. You actually pulled it off." But before he could celebrate, an alert flashed across the console. It wasn't a Federation signal this time, it was something else. Something unknown. Marcus leaned forward, his grin fading. "What the hell is that?" The screen displayed an object approaching rapidly, a sleek, black vessel unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Its design was angular and alien, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. "Analysis incomplete," Egis said, its tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "This vessel does not match any known Federation or extraterrestrial records." Marcus stared at the screen, a sinking feeling gnawing at his gut. Whatever this was, it wasn't friendly, and it was heading straight for them. "Great," he muttered. Because things weren't bad enough already. The ship shuddered as the alien vessel closed in, its presence looming like a dark omen. Marcus tightened his grip on the controls, his heart pounding as a single thought echoed in his mind. What have I gotten myself into? The Leviathan groaned under the stress of its sudden hyperspace jump, a low metallic whine echoing through the halls like the ship was catching its breath. Marcus tightened his grip on the console as the sleek, alien vessel drew closer, its ominous silhouette filling the primary viewport. Its surface shimmered like liquid obsidian, the faint glow of pulsating lines running across its hull, suggesting advanced technology far beyond anything Marcus had encountered, even beyond the Federation's best. "What do you mean it doesn't match any records?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp with tension. "You're telling me the galaxy's most paranoid military didn't think to catalog this thing?" "Correct. No Federation, Zorak, or Allied database contains schematics resembling this vessel." Egis's tone was calm, almost detached, but there was an undercurrent of something Marcus hadn't heard before. Hesitation. "So, what are we looking at? A ghost ship? A rogue experiment? Or are we about to meet aliens with a serious grudge?" Hypotheses are inconclusive. The pause that followed was just long enough to make Marcus glance suspiciously at the console. However, the probability of hostility is statistically significant. "Fantastic," Marcus muttered, rolling his eyes. "You could have just said, duck." But sarcasm wasn't going to save him now. He needed a plan. Fast. The alien ship's approach was deliberate, almost predatory. No weapon systems were visible, but Marcus wasn't naive enough to believe it wasn't armed. The Federation had taught him that the most dangerous enemies rarely advertise their strength. He could feel the sweat gathering on the back of his neck as he scanned the control panel for options. Unfortunately, the Leviathan wasn't in fighting shape. Half its systems were still in recovery from the jump, and the rest were barely functional. They wouldn't survive another firefight. "Incoming transmission," Egis announced abruptly, the words slicing through the tense silence like a blade. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Transmission. From them." "Affirmative." A moment later, the cockpit filled with a deep, resonant hum, followed by a voice that was simultaneously melodic and unnervingly cold. The language was unrecognizable, a cascade of sounds that seemed to bypass his ears and lodge directly in his brain. Marcus winced, gripping the armrests of his chair. What is this?" he gasped. "Unknown linguistic encoding detected." Translating, as Egis worked, the voice shifted, becoming clearer, its tone sharpening into something Marcus could almost understand. "Human vessel," the alien voice said at last, its words crisp yet unnaturally precise. "You are trespassing in restricted space. Surrender immediately, or face annihilation." Marcus swallowed hard, his mind racing. Trespassing, restricted space. He hadn't seen any borders or warning beacons before the jump, but then again, he'd barely had time to check where they were going. "Respond," the alien voice demanded. This is your only warning. Marcus leaned forward, his hands trembling as he activated the comm system. Hi, this is Marcus Corran, captain of the Leviathan. Well, okay, maybe not captain, more like caretaker. Look, this is a big misunderstanding. We didn't mean to, trespass. We were just trying to— The alien voice cut him off. Silence. Your intent is irrelevant. Your presence violates the accords. Accords, Marcus repeated, glancing at Egis. What accords? Cross-referencing term. Accords, the AI replied. No matches found in Federation treaties. Of course not, Marcus muttered under his breath. Why would this day get any easier? The alien ship pulsed with light, its hull shifting as if alive. Marcus felt a chill crawl up his spine as it began to emit a low-frequency vibration, the kind that made his teeth ache and his stomach churn. Hostile energy buildup detected, Egis warned. Probability of imminent attack, 94%. Marcus's jaw tightened. Okay, fine. If they want a fight, let's give them one. Your confidence is statistically unfounded. Yeah, well, so is my life. But here we are. The first strike came faster than Marcus could have anticipated. A beam of searing light lanced from the alien vessel, striking the Leviathan's shields. The impact rattled the ship, sending Marcus sprawling out of his chair. Sparks erupted from the control panels as alarms blared across the cockpit. Shields at 47%, Egis reported. Marcus scrambled back into his seat, his mind a chaotic whirl of half-formed ideas. The Leviathan wasn't in any shape to withstand a prolonged engagement, and running wasn't an option, not with the alien ship on their tail. Can we return fire? He asked, his voice tight with urgency. Primary weapons remain offline. Secondary systems are inoperable. Great. So what do we have? Rerouting auxiliary power to defensive systems. Tactical suggestion. Exploit environmental variables. Environmental variables. What does that even— Marcus stopped mid-sentence, his eyes darting to the viewport. The debris field. It was dense, sprawling, and unpredictable. An obstacle course that could just as easily kill them as save them. You're suggesting we fly through that? He asked incredulously. Affirmative. Their vessel's mass and velocity indicate reduced maneuverability in confined spaces. Marcus hesitated. Flying through the debris field was a gamble, but it was better than sitting here waiting to be vaporized. He tightened his grip on the controls, his pulse hammering in his ears. All right, Egis. Let's see if we can lose them. The Leviathan surged forward, its engines roaring as Marcus steered them into the chaotic expanse of shattered metal and rock. The alien ship followed, its sleek form cutting through the debris like a shark through water. Marcus gritted his teeth, weaving through the jagged wreckage with as much precision as his battered ship could manage. Behind them, the alien vessel unleashed another barrage, beams of light slicing through the debris field. One shot grazed the Leviathan's flank, sending a shudder through the ship. Hull integrity compromised, Egis reported. Yeah, I noticed, Marcus snapped, narrowly avoiding a collision with a massive chunk of twisted metal. Can't you do something useful, like, I don't know, hack their systems? Attempts to infiltrate their network have been unsuccessful. Their technology is anomalous. Anomalous? Marcus echoed. Great, that's comforting. Another shot streaked past, narrowly missing the Leviathan. Marcus swore under his breath, his knuckles white as he guided the ship through a narrow gap in the debris. The alien vessel hesitated for a fraction of a second before pursuing, its larger size making the maneuver more difficult. Target trajectory indicates increased stress on their propulsion systems, Egis noted. Probability of critical failure rising. Well, at least one of us is having a good day, Marcus muttered. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might escape. The alien ship faltered, its movements becoming less fluid as it struggled to navigate the debris field. But just as hope began to creep into Marcus's chest, something unexpected happened. The debris field shifted. Massive fragments of wreckage began to move, drifting in unnatural patterns as if guided by an unseen force. Marcus's stomach dropped as the pieces coalesced, forming a barrier that cut off their escape route. What the hell is this? he demanded, his voice edged with panic. Gravitational anomalies detected, Egis replied. Origin unknown. The alien ship slowed, its glowing hull pulsating rhythmically. For a moment, Marcus thought it was preparing another attack, but instead the vessel emitted a series of vibrations, low and haunting, like a song carried through the void. The debris responded. The fragments shifted again, opening a path, not for the Leviathan, but for the alien vessel. Marcus watched in stunned silence as the ship glided through the opening, its movements almost reverent. Analysis. Their vessel appears to exert localized gravitational control, Egis said. This level of technology exceeds current Federation capabilities by an estimated 500 years. Marcus's grip on the controls tightened. So, what you're saying is, we're completely out of our depth. An accurate assessment. For the first time, Marcus felt the full weight of his situation. He wasn't just up against the Federation anymore. This was something bigger, something far beyond his understanding. And for all his sarcasm and bravado, he was utterly unprepared. The alien ship stopped just ahead of the Leviathan, its ominous form blocking their path. The vibrations returned, this time louder, resonating through the Leviathan's hull. Marcus flinched, covering his ears. What are they doing?" he asked. "Unknown," Egis replied. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. The cockpit lights flickered, and a single message appeared on the console, written in a language Marcus didn't recognize. "Translation complete," Egis said. "Message reads, 'Prove your worth.'" Marcus stared at the screen, his heart pounding. "Prove our worth? What the hell does that mean?" Before Egis could respond, the alien ship emitted a burst of light, and Marcus felt the Leviathan lurch violently. The stars outside blurred, and then everything went black. When Marcus opened his eyes, he found himself staring at an unfamiliar sky. The Leviathan was grounded, its hull battered but intact. Around them stretched a vast, alien landscape, jagged peaks of crystalline rock rising against a deep purple sky. "Location unknown," Egis said. "All systems operational, no signs of hostile presence." Marcus stepped out of the cockpit, his boots crunching against the crystalline ground. In the distance, he saw a structure, massive, ancient, and radiating an eerie blue light. "Well," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I guess we're proving our worth." And somewhere, deep in the back of his mind, a voice whispered a terrifying thought. What if we can't? The crystalline terrain crunched beneath Marcus's boots as he approached the towering alien structure. Its monolithic form loomed against the violet sky, pulsating with an eerie, rhythmic light that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. He tightened his grip on the plasma cutter strapped to his side, though he doubted it would be of much use here. The air was cold, almost sterile, and carried a faint hum, like the planet itself was alive and watching. Behind him, the Leviathan stood battered but functional, its once proud hull now riddled with scars from the pursuit. Inside, Egis remained eerily quiet, analyzing their surroundings. Marcus had asked for a detailed scan of the structure ahead, but the AI had provided only a cryptic reply. "Unknown material, unknown energy signature." The lack of answers was unnerving. Marcus stopped at the base of the structure, craning his neck to take it all in. The sheer scale was dizzying, the surface covered in intricate patterns that shimmered like liquid metal. He reached out cautiously, his hand hovering inches from the surface. "Touch it, and it'll probably zap you into another dimension," he muttered to himself, his voice a mix of nerves and dry humor. "Observation. Fear often manifests as humor," Egis commented suddenly, its voice crackling through the comms. Marcus jumped, scowling at his wrist console. "Don't sneak up on me like that. I lack a physical form with which to sneak." "Yeah, well, you still—" He cut himself off as the patterns on the structure shifted, rearranging themselves like a living puzzle. A doorway emerged from the smooth surface, its edges glowing faintly. Marcus stared at it, his mouth dry. "Well," he said, trying to steady his voice. "I guess that's our invitation." The doorway led into a vast chamber, its walls lined with more of the shifting patterns. The light here was dim, casting long shadows that danced as Marcus moved deeper inside. The hum he'd heard earlier grew louder, resonating in his chest like a second heartbeat. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep moving. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, its surface smooth and unblemished, except for a single indentation, a handprint. Above it hovered a sphere of light, pulsing softly like a dying star. "This construct is emitting high levels of exotic radiation," Egis reported. "Purpose unclear. Approach with caution." "Yeah, thanks for the heads up," Marcus muttered, stepping closer. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, though the room was empty. His gaze flicked to the handprint on the pedestal. "Let me guess," he said. "I put my hand there, and something either unlocks or explodes. Statistically, both outcomes are possible." "Great. Love those odds." He hesitated, his hand hovering over the pedestal. "Any brilliant ideas? Or do I just wing it?" "Your physiology suggests compatibility with the interface. Proceed." Marcus rolled his eyes. "You're really selling this, Egis." Taking a deep breath, he placed his hand on the pedestal. The chamber lit up instantly, the walls erupting with cascading patterns of light. Marcus stumbled back, shielding his eyes as the sphere above the pedestal flared brighter. "Human!" A voice boomed, filling the chamber. It wasn't mechanical like Egis or cold like the aliens. It was something else, something vast and ancient. Hi," Marcus said, squinting against the light. "Can we skip the whole ominous introduction and get to the part where you tell me what's going on?" The voice ignored him. "You have trespassed upon the proving grounds of the Primarch. Your species is young, reckless, unworthy." "Unworthy? That's a bit harsh, don't you think?" Marcus shot back. "I mean, sure, we're not perfect, but we're not all bad." Silence. The voice carried a weight that made Marcus's knees buckle. "You were brought here to be tested, to determine if your kind has the capacity to evolve beyond destruction." "Tested?" Marcus frowned. "What kind of test are we talking about?" The sphere pulsed again, and suddenly the room shifted. The walls disappeared, replaced by an expanse of stars. Marcus felt the ground vanish beneath his feet, though he remained upright as if held by invisible forces. He spun around, panic rising as the leviathan appeared in the distance, surrounded by a fleet of alien vessels. "What is this?" he demanded. "Some kind of simulation, a reflection of truth," the voice replied. "Your vessel, your choices, your survival, all insignificant. Show us your worth, or perish." Marcus clenched his fists, his mind racing. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than the voice. "You want a show? Let's give you one." The scene shifted again, and Marcus found himself back on the Leviathan, the cockpit alive with warning lights. Outside, the alien fleet moved into formation, their weapons charging. "Status update. We are surrounded," Egis said, unnecessarily. "Yeah, I noticed," Marcus snapped, sliding into the pilot's chair. "What are our options?" "Minimal. Hostile forces outmatch our firepower by several orders of magnitude." "Then we need a different play," Marcus said, his mind working furiously. "What about their tech? Can we hijack their systems?" "Their network architecture is unlike anything encountered. Attempts to interface have failed." Marcus's gaze darted to the holographic display, his thoughts racing. The alien fleet wasn't just superior, it was flawless, perfectly coordinated, without the inefficiencies of human error. But that perfection might be their weakness. "They're too good," he said aloud, a grin forming despite the circumstances. "Clarify. They're predictable," Marcus explained. "No mistakes, no surprises. If we throw them a curveball, they won't know how to handle it. Your plan involves deliberate error." "Exactly. Let's see how perfect they really are." The Leviathan lurched into motion, its engines roaring as Marcus pushed the ship into a series of erratic maneuvers. He steered toward the densest cluster of enemy ships, feigning recklessness as he looped through their formation. The aliens responded with surgical precision, their weapons firing in unison, but Marcus was counting on that. As the first salvo approached, he activated the Leviathan's remaining decoy systems, flooding the area with with holographic duplicates of the ship. The alien targeting systems faltered, momentarily confused by the sudden influx of false signals. Marcus seized the opportunity, weaving through the chaos as he headed for the largest vessel in the fleet. Their flagship is heavily shielded. Direct assault is inadvisable, Egis warned. Good thing we're not attacking, Marcus said, his grin widening. We're boarding. The Leviathan docked with the alien flagship in a daring maneuver that left Marcus's hands shaking. He grabbed his toolkit and sprinted toward the airlock, his mind racing. The alien vessel's gravitational control systems had been the key to its dominance. If he could disrupt them, the entire fleet would fall into disarray. Inside, the ship was a labyrinth of glowing corridors, its walls alive with shifting patterns. Marcus moved quickly, following Egis's directions as the AI mapped the interior in real time. He reached what appeared to be the central control chamber, its core a massive, pulsating orb of energy. This system regulates their fleet's cohesion, Egis explained. Disabling it will disrupt their formations. Disabling it, huh? Marcus muttered, examining the intricate machinery. More like improvising wildly. He set to work, bypassing circuits and rerouting energy flows with the skill of someone who'd spent their life fixing things they didn't fully understand. The core resisted his tampering, sparks flying as the system fought back. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't stop. Almost. There, he muttered. The core flared brightly, then dimmed, its energy dispersing in a ripple that shook the entire ship. Alarms blared as the fleet outside lost its cohesion, ships veering off course and colliding with one another in the chaos. Gravitational control neutralized, Egis confirmed. Hostile forces retreating. Marcus slumped against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I can't believe that actually worked. Your actions exceeded expectations, Egis said. Don't get all sentimental on me, Marcus replied with a weak grin. Back on the surface, the alien voice returned, its tone less imposing than before. You have demonstrated adaptability and ingenuity, traits we did not expect from your kind. Marcus crossed his arms, glaring at the glowing sphere. Yeah, well, we're full of surprises. So what now? You gonna zap us back home? You have earned your place among the stars. Use it wisely. The light faded, and Marcus found himself back in the Leviathan, the alien structure gone. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, and for the first time, they felt like an open road rather than a prison. Destination? Egis asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. Let's wing it. The ship hummed to life, and with a roar, they disappeared into the void, leaving nothing behind but the faint echo of a mechanic who refused to follow the rules. Marcus stared at the endless stretch of stars visible through the cockpit's viewport. The hum of the Leviathan's engines was steady, soothing even, but his thoughts churned like a storm. For the first time since the chaos began, there was silence. No blaring alarms, no alien fleets, no cryptic voices demanding his worth. Just him, the ship, and the vastness of space. But something gnawed at him, an itch he couldn't scratch. You appear contemplative, Egis remarked, breaking the silence. Marcus let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. Just thinking. Your previous actions demonstrated strategic improvisation. The outcome was optimal. What concerns remain? Marcus gestured at the stars. I don't know. All of this. What we just went through. The whole prove your worth thing. Who were those aliens? What happens if they decide we're not worth it next time? What if... Hypotheticals are irrelevant, Egis interrupted. The challenge presented was resolved. The outcome is sufficient. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Sufficient? Yeah, sure. Except we're sitting on a ship half held together by duct tape, and I just pissed off a fleet of aliens whose technology makes us look like cavemen. Correction. The aliens have withdrawn. Current threat level, negligible. He leaned back in his chair, the tension in his body slowly unwinding. Maybe Egis was right. Maybe he was overthinking it. But the nagging unease wouldn't let go. Then a soft chime rang out from the console. Marcus frowned, leaning forward as an unfamiliar signal appeared on the display. It was weak, barely detectable, but definitely not from the Leviathan. He tapped a few buttons, isolating the signal and amplifying it. Is that a distress call? He asked. Affirmative, Source, human vessel. Location, uncharted system. Marcus stared at the screen. A part of him wanted to ignore it. He'd been through enough, more than enough, and he'd earned the right to some peace and quiet, but the thought of someone else out there, stranded, alone, and calling for help, hit too close to home. "Can we make it?" he asked finally. "Yes, however, auxiliary systems will require—" "Just get us there," Marcus cut in. The Leviathan shifted course, its engines flaring as it surged toward the signal's source. As the ship accelerated, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. For the first time, he wasn't running from something or fighting to survive. He was moving towards something he could fix, something that mattered. Hours later, the Leviathan dropped out of hyperspace, the faint distress signal now loud and clear. In the distance, a small ship drifted aimlessly, its hull scorched and its lights flickering. Marcus maneuvered the Leviathan closer, his eyes scanning the vessel for signs of life. "Life signs detected. 3, Egis reported. All faint. Minimal power remaining on the vessel." Marcus nodded, already grabbing his toolkit. "Prep the airlock. Let's bring them aboard." Minutes later, the survivors were safely on the Leviathan. 2 of them were unconscious, but the third, a woman in her 40s with a sharp gaze and a Federation officer's uniform, sat upright, her breathing labored but steady. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. This ship, what is it?" Marcus gave her a tired smile. "Long story. Let's just say it's a fixer-upper." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "We were ambushed. Federation reinforcements won't arrive in time. There's something out there, something hunting us." "Aliens?" Marcus guessed, his stomach tightening. The woman shook her head. "No, worse. Federation experiments gone rogue. AI weapons that broke containment." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Of course it wasn't over. Of course the Federation's secrets would come back to haunt him. He glanced at the unconscious survivors, then back at the woman. "Well," he said, forcing a grin, "looks like we've got our next project." She raised an eyebrow. "You're insane." "Probably," Marcus admitted, "but I've got a ship, an AI with a superiority complex and just enough luck to scrape by. That's got to count for something, right?" For the first time, she smiled. It was faint, but it was there. "I hope you're right." Marcus stood, his grin fading as he looked toward the cockpit. The Leviathan hummed around him, battered but alive, waiting for its next challenge. He didn't know what was coming next, but for once, that didn't bother him. He had a purpose, a direction, and that was enough. "Course plotted," Egis announced. "Awaiting confirmation," Marcus smirked. "Let's wing it." The ship roared to life, its engines flaring as it disappeared into the void, leaving behind only the faint echo of laughter and the hum of a mechanic who had finally found his place among the stars.